Hello. Hello and welcome to another online presentation from Biometric Update. Just slowly getting started here and waiting for people to join the call. Numbers are ticking their way up here. Yeah, but we just have a brief presentation today, so I'll get started. We, as usual, are here to discuss the hot topics and important issues in biometrics and digital identity. I'm your host and the managing editor of Biometric Update, Chris Burt. Age assurance is one of the aforementioned hot topics in the industry, to be sure, and the UK is at the epicenter of a global trend in which restrictions are being placed on gambling, pornography, alcohol purchases, perhaps conversation on certain topics in the online world, which we are used to in the physical world. In some cases, digital systems are also being applied in the physical world to impose similar age restrictions. For this reason, Biometric Update and Goode Intelligence have collaborated on the 2025 Online Biometric Age Assurance Market Report and Buyer's Guide, UK edition. The report and buyer's guide was published this month and is intended to help online businesses prepare for the July enforcement deadline reiterated by Ofcom just last week with the publication of the Protection of Children's Codes and Guidance, and also to help industry players understand their place in the broader market. Here to talk about the market and what's in the report, we have Goode Intelligence Chief Analyst and CEO, Alan Goode. Hello, Alan. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Excellent. We also have Biometric Update contributing editor Joel McConvey, who led our side of the efforts for this report. Welcome, Joel.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to be here.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining us. We're going to speed through an overview of the market for age assurance in the UK and chat about what's in the report for about 15 minutes, give or take. And then we're going to field questions from you. Following the presentation, you'll get an email with a link to a video recording and also a 10% discount on the report. So just follow that link in the email to claim the discount. So why does your company need it? You're here because you're aware of the requirements to some degree for age assurance. And I'll ask Alan to talk a bit more about that market in just a minute. But the age assurance situation in the UK is unique. It is one with a robust marketplace. Enforcement action has technically already begun with the deadline for illegal content risk assessments passed in March and the children's access assessments due as of April 16th. OnlyFans had a misconfiguration on its facial age estimation threshold, and Ofcom fined them £1 million. So in short, for all players in the ecosystem, whether you provide age assurance technology or any kind of content online that is restricted by these new laws and regulations in the UK, you need to be aware of how you fit into this ecosystem and be ready for compliance. The certification requirements of the Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework and Ofcom's guidance on highly effective age assurance technologies have defined the market in a way that sets up the UK as a sort of a precedent-setting market in some ways, and certainly an interesting test case. Other countries around the world are working quickly to put laws and regulations and trust frameworks in place as well. Joel and I were at the Global Age Assurance Standards Summit in Amsterdam earlier in the month, where it was clear that there is interest in over a dozen countries in moving forward, with several countries, notably including Australia and Brazil, very much nearing the finish line. We've also seen in countries like France and Germany, enforcement is underway. The rules are solidifying. The UK provides laws that cover a variety of harms and really has a comprehensive enforcement plan. And so that's why we have started with the UK. On that note, to say a little bit more about the market in general, I'd like to ask Alan to step in and share some thoughts with us.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple of slides which will act as a guide to this. Bear with me while I get these up. Here we go. Yeah. So as part of Good Intelligence and part of our kind of skills in market analysis and research, we took the market overview and the what to look for in a biometric age verification provider. A key finding from the research was the major impact of government legislation to protect children online that is gaining traction around the world, and what Chris was talking about before I came on. So this report concentrates on the UK, where the UK's Online Safety Act is having a major impact on online age assurance in the UK. And this section covers market analysis and forecasts for UK biometric age assurance. It investigates key drivers, adoption, key applications and sectors for the UK biometric age assurance. And we have 3-year forecasts for transactions and for revenue covering the years 2025 to 2027. The 4 key drivers that we found really for face liveness, biometric age assurance are compliance with the legislation, protecting children online, parental control, and market advantage. But obviously, the predominant one is number 1, which is compliance. For the UK, compliance with the UK Online Safety Act 2023 is a major driver for the adoption of biometric age assurance. And the OSA comprehensive, it's a comprehensive piece of legislation designed to regulate online content and protect users, especially children, from harmful content and from harmful material. So if we look at the key sectors, we investigated the key sectors that are driving adoption. Key sectors for age verification service are intrinsically linked to accessing goods and services that have an age rating and should only be used by an adult. And this report looks purely at digital. And we know there's obviously a lot of activity in the physical space, in retail, with buying vapes and buying alcohol, etc. But this report purely looks at the digital and online. So we've identified 7 key sectors that are leading the way with adoption of age verification services. Obviously, number 1 is pornography, either specialist websites or through social media and video sharing services, video gaming, gambling, including National Lottery, social media, that link to pornography as well, entertainment, so they're accessing film content and related to the age rating from the BBFC, e-commerce with retail, restricted items including alcohol, tobacco products including cigarettes, vapes, knives and blades, restricted medicines including painkillers, crossbows and other similar weapons, fireworks and corrosive substances, etc., and online dating. So from a forecasting perspective, let me back up. My apologies. Forecasting, very important to us, and we've got a good track record of forecasting emerging areas since 2009, and we believe that we're looking at a market that is headline forecast of 201 million revenue by 2027 within 3 years. For pricing in the biometric age assurance transaction fees, we reach out to our network and find out what the typical average prices are. There will be differences in prices between sectors and between vendors, and in terms of the technology that is used and how is it used. And there will be discounting in larger volumes. So in terms of looking at what to look out for in a biometric age verification provider, number 1 is obviously, will it comply with the Online Safety Act, Ofcom's requirements on having a robust age verification solution to ensure children do not access inappropriate adult content and purchase prohibited goods comes into force this year. It's already come into force, with July being the date for robust age verification for Category 5 companies, which is the porn business. Companies must comply or face penalties up to 10% of global turnover. And Chris has obviously mentioned that Ofcom are already been active in this space. The cost, does it meet your budget expectations? And accuracy and reliability. I think this is the kind of very interesting area. Is it certified? Is it tested? Standards help ensure that age verification processes are reliable, secure, and effective in protecting children from accessing age-sensitive content. Standards include EEE 2089.1, BSA PAS 1296 2018, and ISO IEC 27566. So there are standards, and we know that obviously NIST are involved in this as well. Talking about biometric solutions, does it meet biometric liveness standards? We did an earlier report looking at biometric liveness and with ensuring that it's testing against liveness detection and also is certified against ISO and FIDO standards is very, very critical for the buyer community. Secure for privacy and data protection compliance, does it meet EU GDPR and other state legislation related to the collection, storage, and use of biometric data? And security, does supplier have cybersecurity certifications and adhere to cybersecurity guidance best practice? At a base level, this could include certification for UK Cyber Essentials. And does it meet your specific usability requirements? So they're the 7 key ones, and we stress that it's up to individual organizations to do their own testing, to have their own requirements. But these are the kind of the 7 broad items that are important for buyers of this particular software. So back to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Alan. And as you can see from that list of what to look for, there is a little bit of complexity here. There are a number of factors to consider. So with that market overview and sort of start on advice for buyers in mind, I'd like to turn to Joel now. And Joel, maybe you can flesh out for us who we identified as pioneers in this market, and also a little bit about what that means.
Absolutely. So yeah, we have a list of pioneers that's included in the report. Excuse my voice, I'm a little froggy this morning. But what we're really doing is looking at firms that have blazed a trail and become leaders in the sector, as well as firms that have kind of innovated or refined a particular approach to age assurance. So, for instance, you have a firm like Yoti, and they're included because they've been doing this for a while. They offer a relatively wide range of options for clients to choose from, and they've sort of established themselves as a name that people know in this sector, in as much as people know names in the age assurance sector, which they certainly will in the next little while, I'm sure. But then you also have a firm like Needham, and this is a firm that we included because they are exploring a novel kind of approach to age assurance, which is hand gestures, and that's an age estimation approach. So we have this balance of firms that have sort of really kind of established themselves as early leaders, and then firms that are really kind of testing the waters. And I think it's interesting here, worth quoting Tony Allen from the Age Check certification scheme. He says it's still early days. And I think this is something we know, right? Speaking of the complexity and the way the market is changing, there's still a lot of exploration going on. And so people are looking at, a lot of the people working in the space are still working with face biometrics, facial matching, face estimation, but you're getting people looking at different kinds of techniques as well, or different kinds of approaches. So that's really what we were looking for, is either a sort of strong presence in the market at present, or something we can see kind of branching off and becoming its own kind of new approach or more novel approach to age assurance. And I think, we'll discuss this afterwards, but we may be seeing a situation in which firms kind of hone their approach and tailor it to specific use cases as the ecosystem becomes more complex and use cases begin to emerge and sort of show or reveal their own specifics in terms of needs. So just briefly, I think it's worth running through the list to sort of get the details. You'll have to buy the report, but our pioneers include Age Checked, Dayon, FaceTech, Innovatrix, Lucidity, Mytech, Needemand, Neurotechnology, Ondato, Privado, Paravision, Privately, Regula, Rock, formerly Rank 1 Computing, Citalis, SumSub, VerifyMy, and Yoti. So congratulations to the age assurance pioneers. We appreciate your work. And like I said, you can learn more about each of those firms in the report. But we encourage you to sort of go and explore the full scope of what these firms are offering as these regulations come into effect and it becomes a more pressing need.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, a couple of interesting points raised there too, in terms of the different areas that are being addressed in different ways, and also in terms of what makes a pioneer now, which is not it's in some ways similar, in fact, to this exercise when we were doing it with liveness, where these are more emerging technologies that are sort of being perfected. I suppose you could argue that liveness is a little further along, but at the same time, you have something like injection attacks, which is rolled into liveness and is really shaking up the space. The regulatory side, the standard side, this is all kind of emerging, kind of falling into place. So we have our first question. Oh, we do. You know what? We're looking for our first question. So I'd like to invite all of you to use the Q&A to pose some questions for Alan, Joel, and myself. But before we do so, I would like to dig a little bit into that sort of the niche potential of the market. So I end up wondering, for instance, to what extent the technologies used for age assurance for adult content will be the same technologies that are used for age assurance for something like gambling. So yeah, Alan, maybe you could start us off with any thoughts on how the market will break down, to what extent there will be niche markets, and what those might be within the UK.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I think that they will be kind of sector specific. I think in terms of what's acceptable for consumers, what's acceptable for people accessing or buying kind of age restricted goods and services. So the question is for accessing pornography, is it, do you want to give up your identity documents? Do you want to show your face? Do you want to from a privacy perspective, and from it's a very, very sensitive area, and I think that will kind of drive how age assurance, age verification will look for that particular market. And obviously that's the one that Ofcom is concentrating on now, because I think it's one of the most important things that we need to protect. As a father of a 17-year-old son, I think it's important to protect our children from accessing this content. But it's the kind of what is acceptable without ruining the service, and pornography services are legal. How to do that in a kind of a way that is privacy preserving and potentially anonymous, I think is a very critical point. Yeah,
absolutely. Joel, you have had some thoughts, I think, as well on how the different pieces might fit together to serve different parts of the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening is you're seeing the market reveal its complexity in real time. And I think that, again, you made the point, what works for one use case may not work for another. I do think that a big piece that comes into this is digital ID. That's sort of a part of the pie that doesn't necessarily get discussed that much in terms of the biometric age assurance piece, but that could change the landscape altogether in terms of people becoming more comfortable with a certain process, people acclimatizing to the idea that their ID is digital and it's private, and building trust and whatnot. So that's something I think is fascinating. And then I think you'll also see things sort of shake up in terms of what do we really need this for? And then on the one hand, okay, maybe we can use something that's a little less invasive, or the age estimation approach will work better. But then on the other hand, I think you're going to have people ask, do we need this at all for anybody? Do we really need to verify that you're 18 to get you on a suicide discussion forum? Or is this maybe something we shouldn't have at all? Similar to, there was a piece yesterday where the Children's Safety Commissioner in the UK is calling for a ban on these so-called notification apps, and makes the point that, this isn't something that society needs. It's not useful. It's not providing anything positive. So I think that'll be the fascinating thing too, is to see where age assurance sort of, validates certain things and normalizes them. And I think, you're going to have to find a solution for adult content because it's not going away. But then you'll also see, as the sort of landscape becomes more clear, where these things are really needed and where other kinds of legislation or regulatory approaches are required.
Absolutely. So the ongoing evolution of those regulations, the passage of different laws, definitely part of our motivation in producing this report, and also part of the reason that we started with the UK, because in the UK, some of these questions, as Joel just referred to, with the notification apps, still unsettled. Elsewhere, much more so, at least in most other jurisdictions. So there's definitely going to be a lot of context that is set over the next little while. Another thing I just wanted to ask you guys quickly before turning to questions from the audience is, we talked about this market in terms of the biometric aspect of it. And for us in this report, that mostly meant face at this point, facial age estimation, to some extent, selfie ID or selfie checks against an ID. Joel, can you put that a little bit into context for us in terms of what else is available and how that might be changing?
Well, like I mentioned, the hand gesture, need a man, or as I like to call them, need a hand, because you're literally making gestures with your hands to sort of perform age estimation. It's hard to say, really. There's one academic I spoke with at the Age Assurance Standards Summit who promised to reveal something the following year, this coming year, that would be an entirely new kind of approach. I was sifting through the biometric update archives recently and came across a piece about the ears as a potential thing you could look at. So I think we're still at the beginning of that, where people are maybe realizing what the limitations on facial age verification or estimation are for certain use cases, and asking, what else can we do? Where else can we look on the body or in terms of the biology of someone to estimate their age? And I think, the fascinating story about the hand thing is that it was reportedly discovered because someone was testing, the effects of doping for sports on this tendon. And the algorithm basically said, well, I'm not sure if they were doping, but I can tell you that they were between, 27 and 30 years old. And they thought, well, maybe we have something here. I believe Jean-Michel is perhaps on the call here. But the kind of answer is wait and see. I think we'll see what people come up with in terms of looking beyond the face to different kinds of approaches that do have a different sort of privacy angle to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Alan, anything to add on different modalities?
Yeah, and voice can be again, or fused voice and face can be used. I think the kind of the there are a number of modalities that can be used, whether they're accurate enough, whether we and what is the threshold for accuracy. And I think we still, obviously we do have the standards that I mentioned, but I think that it's kind of, it is emerging in terms of what is acceptable. It's 80% okay, 90%, in terms of do we need to have a human in the loop to kind of then to verify them. So it's without turning customer away. So I think that's that kind of balance, I think, in terms of getting it right, getting it accurate, and also making sure that from a workflow perspective, that it is embedded into the onboarding or the access and protocols.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense, and that gives us a great segue to our first question, which is specific to those standards. So, yeah, we have a question: does certification against international standards such as the IEEE 2089, the Alan that you mentioned, or the ISO 27566, or the BSI PAS 1296 2018? So that's the German regulation. These are, yeah, good starting point. Do they provide buyers with useful reassurance and a defense to Ofcom or the ICO if compliance is challenged?
I think it's early days for that kind of, whether ICO or Ofcom will say, yeah, if you have this. I think it depends on the implementation and how it acts in the live. I think what will happen is that people will start to use it, and there may be complaints that people are being turned away, or it's it's inaccurate or something, and that's for all the algorithms. And the algorithms, obviously very important. It's obviously part of OSA and Ofcom's remit in terms of thresholds for algorithms. But I think it is from a buyer's perspective, when you're buying a solution, I think if your provider is certified to one of these or three of these, then I think it does give them a little bit more of assurance. It's that kind of tick in a box, really. And I think this is why we mentioned 7 kind of base criteria for reviewing technology in this space, because I think it's important that they're all combined, really, and they're all kind of relevant. I think time will tell in terms of the how ICO and Ofcom kind of measure robustness and effectiveness of these solutions.
Yeah, it seems to me that standards, being able to show that your chosen technology is compliant with the standard, is probably going to help, at least in some situations, right? And I'm reminded of Ofcom's. Ofcom did an online engagement event. I guess it was online and in person not so long ago, and they were very much emphasizing that they want to work with service providers, and that if you come to them with a question like this, or any other question related to how can I comply with the regulations, if you're really taking that approach, they're going to be happy to work with you. And they were keen to emphasize that would not trigger a enforcement action. So that's probably a good approach. From the perspective of actually getting buy-in and getting the kind of engagement that they're hoping for. So, I mean, I think that's, I'm just happy to emphasize or share Ofcom's message that they want people, working on this to reach out to them. Yeah, Joel, anything to add on that one before we move on to the next question?
I actually just have a question, which is, I know there's been, Ofcom sort of requires highly effective age assurance, and this is a term that gets pitched around a lot and debated a fair bit. And I know there was a desire in the industry for them to put numbers on that term at some point and say you have to actually statistically meet these sort of thresholds. But I believe that hasn't happened yet. That's correct, right? So I think that'll be an interesting conversation going forward, is like, well, at some point you're probably going to have to be precise about what highly effective means, because if it's a hard legal requirement, it can't be sort of well, this looks good. There's got to be some numerical or metric
But yeah, perhaps the best way to do that is to defer to a testing lab. So, you know, is UCAS in the UK or NIST in obviously global in the US, I think. So perhaps it's that reference to a technology standard in terms of thresholds rather, because, you know, they don't want to be, and it's very, very similar to other kind of, if you look at PSD2 and the technical regulations there, they are very high level, and I think they have to be high level, because otherwise it means that you're putting someone down a single track rather than giving them option. Yeah.
And I think, you know, obviously the ISO standard will probably help a lot in terms of creating, as Tony has said, a kind of global age assurance standard that people can build off of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think it's worth reiterating too that the fine that we saw already was essentially Ofcom saying you can't get it right this way, right? If you don't set the threshold properly, it doesn't really matter how accurate it is. It's just not going to be right. So you make sure you have that configuration piece right. But yeah, we'll certainly continue watching that standard space. Yeah, probably good to get a test with an accredited lab to those standards such as are available. Got a question here about what are the chances of protocols and systems that enable interoperability of age checks across multiple platforms emerging, so users don't have to do new checks for every site or app they use. Yeah, this is definitely has been a topic of conversation in the market. Either of you like to take a first crack at that?
Alan?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think that's a maturing that's a maturity really. So if we're looking for identity verification, which is the market we cover, you know, it's every time you need to do it on board, register for a new account, you need to go through that similar process, I think. But now there's a kind of movement towards having, you know, digital identities with verifiable credentials in a wallet, that you can do it with the correct plumbing and infrastructure. It means that you don't have to do it time and time again. Perhaps you may need to re-verify at certain points when there's higher risk, but it's a case of, you know, are you 18? Yes, I am, and you can ping, you know, my wallet. And I think that's perhaps where we will move towards. But I think at the moment, I think it's a case of it'll probably be more on a kind of a that kind of network is certainly kind of not available. Obviously, another important play, and we've seen some big noise coming from Google only this week in related to wallets and age. And I think, you know, it's a case of how will they work in this world? Is it going to be good enough? I don't think it probably will be for, you know, accessing sites. I think it'd be okay for on an app basis. But then obviously that brings in another kind of area of consideration is how do platforms, mobile operating systems, etc., then kind of operate in this space in terms of, you know, restricting people to even download a particular app. So yeah, I think it's a long answer, but I think perhaps to finish off, not quite there yet, I think.
Yeah, reusability. Sorry, go ahead, Joel.
I was going to say, you definitely heard a lot about tokenization at the summit, and to me, that's a useful sort of metaphor, because it really sort of hits home that, like, what you are issued is a you know, a virtual token that says, yes, I'm 18, or yes, I'm of age, and that's what you give virtually to all the sites that you go to, so they don't get any of your other information. They just know you're 18 or whatever age you have to be. And that's obviously oversimplifying it, but I think that's an approach that you're seeing sort of bubble up to the surface as well, is this idea that you have an age token that's reusable across different sites.
Yes, people are working on this very question. Absolutely. Yeah, so thanks for those answers. I actually just want to call out at this point too that I maybe slightly mischaracterized the reason for the Ofcom fine on OnlyFans, which Chris Field has pointed out here. So thank you, Chris. Chris points out that it's really because they said they had the threshold set one way, and then actually said afterwards it's set a different way. So it's the clarity of the implementation that was actually and the reporting of what that implementation was that was at issue there. Although I think the principle remains the same. You've got to get the configuration right in order to for the accuracy to even mean anything. So just worth mentioning there, just for the sake of clarity. Another question here is, how can companies ensure the reliability and effectiveness of age estimation systems in high-risk environments, particularly with the surge in AI? And how future-proof is age assurance? Do the regulations have specific standards on the associated fraud prevention? So, I mean, I would say that the fraud piece, when it comes to age, ends up being a lot about this accuracy question that we were just discussing. And I don't think that at this point there's a lot of guidance specifically in the regulation about fraudulent age reporting, other than that the method of assurance must be highly effective. Is that a fair way to characterize that, Alan, you think?
Yeah, I think so. And this is where I mentioned live misdetection, and you've mentioned about withstanding deep fakes and injection attacks, and they're related. If you're using FAE face age estimation for this purpose, then you've got a layer on those tools to make sure that it is me trying to access kind of an adult service, and I'm allowed to do so, rather than my son who's got a video of me on an iPad that he's sticking in front of the camera. Although I know he wouldn't do that.
Of course.
Yeah. Chris, yeah. I think also, sorry, just to build on that, I think, or to answer the first part of the question, which is what Alan was touching on earlier, the way to ensure the reliability and accuracy is to look to certification bodies.
Yeah.
And make sure you have something that has, been proven to be trusted, that has, maybe appeared in the NIST rankings if you're, looking at that kind of thing. But there are bodies that will tell you, you can trust this. That's sort of one of the certification bodies. And so, but to follow up, I think also, it's an interesting question, because you probably, in high risk environments, probably shouldn't be using age estimation at all. You should probably be using age verification if the use case is such that you really need to make sure, because the risk is of at a certain threshold. Then perhaps you need a more precise kind of method. So a bit of a messy answer, but I think trust the certification bodies and really tailor your technology to your use case.
Good point.
Yeah, and the future-proof part of this question also sort of just dovetails with what we were talking about earlier about it being early days, new modalities coming in. We were discussing fusion of modalities a little bit just before we started the webinar today, which is an area that could provide some of that future-proofing potentially. So, a lot of watch this space, I guess.
It's interesting though, because there's another question here about someone who's a doctoral candidate focusing on facial recognition in ATMs.
Yeah.
So from a security perspective, would the age verification technology used, could this be applied in ATMs? And I think, to me, the answer there is, if the security aspect works, if you have a highly effective biometric facial age assurance tool, it should be able to work anywhere. Whether or not you should use it is a different story, but the security aspect, again, should be sort of figured out before it gets to any kind of deployment.
Yeah. And we have instances where it's being used in point of sale terminals. So and that could be linked with an identity on a mobile phone as well. So yeah, I think in short answer, I think the question is yes. it can be used. Yeah.
You're starting to see that in the States with MLB, the Major League Baseball. They're really actively pursuing sort of like facial purchasing, where you would go in,
Yeah.
you put a hot dog on a scanner, it looks at your face, and then you walk away with the hot dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings in the whole offline physical space that we've kind of alluded to earlier. We have one last question here. Let's hit this and then call it a day. The question is, what about the elephant in the room? Pricing. Will small sites get charged a lot more while major platforms get big volume discounts? And Alan, you referred to this a little bit earlier. Certainly, pricing and where pricing is going was part of our discussion on this, and you referred to scale or bulk check discounts. But yes, Alan, what would you say about how that's going to affect smaller sites in particular? I guess
I think it will. Per transaction fees are typically higher for smaller volumes. So yes, there may be a kind of a restriction here on operational ability for smaller sites. So yeah, I think if you're if you've got the numbers, then it's from a vendor's perspective, it's easier to discount on a per transaction fee. But there are kind of what we're seeing, kind of this is where the kind of our work across applications and across sectors helps. We're seeing the movement in identity verification where it's starting to move towards a per user per transaction, like a license fee rather than a transaction fee. So we may see that as this matures, we may see a similar kind of pricing model where it's not just per liveness check or per matching check or per age check. It may be a license, and it includes all three of those for a particular thing. So that is a potential, and that may help smaller providers in the longer term.
Yeah, definitely a going concern though, and there is some concern I know in the industry around how the involvement of the gov.uk one login system will affect things. Is that going to introduce a cheaper or differently priced alternative that's going to undermine part of the market? And at the same time, the government, Ofcom, DSIT, everybody has made, I think, pretty clear that they do not want age checks to sound the death knell for smaller online service providers in the UK. So again, this unsatisfactory an answer as it may be, there's a little bit of watch this space going on here. I think that's all the time we have. We've run over the half hour we had allotted for this, but I really want to thank you, Alan, for sharing your insight and talking about the report today. Thanks for joining us as well, Joel, and talking about your contributions to this report and what we've been observing in the market. Thank you to all of you who joined and posed questions. It's been a really interesting chat, and I look forward to engaging more on this topic with all of you. In the meantime, please do take advantage of that emailed 10% discount link and pick up your report and let us know what you think. And we look forward to continuing to follow this space and chatting age assurance with all of you. So until next time, take care and have fun. Thanks, guys.